Trustee Rubin?
Yes.
Trustee Hallwax?
Yes.
Trustee Mealopoulos?
And,
We have a quorum.
Thank you all for being here. And at this point, if there's anybody that would like to speak in public comment, I will read a spiel, and otherwise we will save it. Seeing none.
Thanks, Dave.
The minutes have been circulated for the last meeting. Any comments? If not, could I get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
All in favor? Aye. All right, which brings us to our monthly financial reports.
Thank you so much. So this evening, we'll be going over the January Treasurers Report, going through our fund highlights, looking at our cash flow projections and reserve monitoring. We will look at our community investment program updates, and then we have Heidi Andorfer from Foster & Foster, our actuary, who's going to discuss the potential impacts of Tier 2 pension benefit enhancements on the police pension fund. In your packet, there was on page 57, there was a staff report and then followed by the two Foster & Foster reports that they prepared. I have extra copies if anybody is interested in looking through those while Heidi goes through her presentation later this evening. And then we'll be looking at the consideration of the 2026 Glencoe Alfresco sponsorship program. So going on to our monthly treasurer's report, for January we should be at about 8.3% of our budget. I'll start off talking about the property taxes. So property taxes are currently showing more than the prior year by $2.1 million at 16% of budget. But this is all 2025 tax receipts that will be accrued back to 2025. They are presented in our treasurer's report for January because it is a cash basis report. And so as we go through and get into more of the revenue and expense projections, we'll talk about the actual numbers minus those 2025 tax receipts that are going to be accrued back to 2025.
Could I know this is the report for January, but in point of fact, have we now, with what we've received so far in February, gotten essentially close to 100% of what we anticipated?
Yes, we have received 98% of the tax levy, the total tax levy. So we're in good shape. We may still receive a few more distributions. They have been kind of random through January. We had, I believe, 5 different distributions. As Nikki has said in the past, Cook County really doesn't have a rhyme or reason for the amount or day that they send out those disbursements, but we watch that closely and monitor it for any new funds that come in. And so just as a reminder, again, anything that comes in within 60 days of the end of the fiscal year, December 31st, will be accrued back to 2025 if it is truly 2025 tax receipts.
Thank you.
Going on to talk about the 2026 first installment of property taxes, the due date has been moved from March 1st to April 1st, so they're already expecting a delay. Again, this is related to the county software issues that they're having. It has also been reported that they have over-allocated funds to 50 taxing bodies. We do not believe we're affected by the over-allocation. Like Gary just pointed out, that we're only received 98% of our tax levy so far, so we don't see that over-allocation right now. If for some reason we do receive more funds, we will be holding those funds if they're in excess of the tax levy in case we need to return those funds back to the county. Moving on to sales tax, it was more than the prior year sales, which are October sales, right on target at 8.3% of our budget. And just a note and a reminder that the grocery tax is in effect, but we'll see our first receipt in April. It's running 3 months behind, just like sales taxes. Items that were higher than prior year and the monthly budget include the Illinois income tax, parking fees, PPRT, sewer charges, and E911 charges. One note about PPRT, so this was affected last year greatly, and we were receiving a lot less receipts than was budgeted. We have properly budgeted for it in 2026, so this was above our budget, but our budget is significantly less than last year.
One thing I would just note on that, I saw Brad Cole, who's the executive director of the Illinois Municipal League, last week, and he mentioned that it looks like the PPRT clawbacks have caught up at this point. So to Margaret's point, we're feeling confident that our numbers are accurate for this budget, but that this weird realignment seems to be done. So hopefully 26 will be more, we'll just see more stability over the
Yes.
course of the year.
And that, that budget specifically is set based on the IML projections that they put out every year. So they gave us an idea of what they were going to, what we were going to see, and so that's how we budgeted that budget. Moving on to expenditures for the general fund, they're less than prior year, but right on target at 8.1% of our budget. So looking at our annual revenue projections only, I'd like you to focus on that we're at $187,000 without that 2025 property tax receipt. It is showing that we're at $2.3 million because of that $2.1 million of 2025 tax receipts. But the 187 is the true number. Again, when we look at the expense versus revenue, we are at $2.4 million deficit in the general fund, which is right in line with what we had planned for our drawdown at $2.2 million. And so that's not concerning at all. Fund reserves at month end are at $11.5 million or 42%. Moving on to the water fund, there's nothing really exciting going on here with water. We've had that last billing already that occurred for irrigation season. And so now the increases you're going to see are related to the fees will start increasing as the cycles start getting billed in January, February, March. Expenditures are higher than prior year, but only 5.9% of our budget. And then right on target for our revenue at just over $600. And then looking at our expense versus revenue, water fund is showing an increase of $2.5 million, but that's because that's accounting for the bond proceeds that we would receive this year. There is a planned $3.4 million bond issue in 2026. And then we plan to draw that down by $1.8 million for water projects this year, which includes the water main improvement project, which will be brought before the board next month. Fund reserves at month end are at $5.5 million or 92% of budget. Again, that's a high number just because of the bond proceeds. And I will turn it over to Stella for the golf fund update.
Thank you. So just staffing review, we have had quite a few people already interested in seasonal work, which is excellent. Most of these people are looking for work with the carts and inside the pro shop. The maintenance department is still starved for people that want to do the labor work, but we already got some job postings out there, and we hope to have that filled pretty soon as well. Friends of the Glencoe Golf Club, so another $52,000 was raised in January. And there's another cultivation event being planned in March with one of our board members, Sarah Paff. We have been meeting with Kim Swinton from the Swinton Group, who's our consultant, and we're creating an image of the donors board. And once we show how that's going to look and where it's going to be placed in the clubhouse, Kim feels that that will motivate people to either give more to get to a level to be on that board, or just to actually want to initiate a giving fund with us to get included in the board. And so that's what we're going to start rolling out in April and May. The construction update, and I have some pictures here. So all of the roof trusses have been set, and they're working on completing the roof sheathing. The perimeter walls are being erected, insulated, and wood sheathing is also being installed. The underground plumbing for the kitchen and the 2 individual bathrooms is 80% complete. North Shore gas hookup has been installed, and now they're utilizing it to warm up the basement so they can pour concrete in the basement. We did lose 12 days because of the weather. If the real fuel is at 0 or below, they're not even allowed to work. It was also windy, so we lost 12 days. But the good news is we actually had 26 people on site today. So between carpenters, roofers, electricians, and plumbers, I mean, there is a buzz of activity on the clubhouse, and as you can see from the pictures, it is actually starting to take shape. And
Next one.
looking really good. Everyone's getting excited about it. Yeah.
It's the cart ramp there, takes you down to the lower level where the carts will be stored. And brought back up for the new first tee, which is now the 10th tee.
Coming along. Everyone's excited.
Now that the buckthorn's being removed along Green Bay Road, you actually can see the building from Green Bay Road, which
Yeah.
is a different vantage point for sure.
People are driving slower as well.
Yeah.
Now that you can see.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, people are no longer speeding as you drive.
Yeah, they're like, oh, there's something on the other side of all of this? Yeah.
That concludes my report.
Thank you. Moving on to our other funds, debt service, motor fuel capital projects, and pension funds. Really nothing to note here. Debt service will not have any expenditure except for some fees related to the bank accounts until May when we make our payments for the June interest payments. And then we'll have our interest and principal payments in November for the December deadlines. Capital projects, we have no expenditure in January yet for the 2026 capital projects. For motor fuel tax, very minimal, related to just banking fees, and then pension funds are right on target as expected. Personnel, we did have a little bit of increase you can see in salaries year over year, and that's due to the cost of living increases and also filling more vacant positions. Both this year and last year had 3 payrolls in January, so there's no difference related to that. Moving on to our economic indicators and other updates. We really have not seen any new communication on any price increases. We still are paying attention to that very closely and monitoring how the Fed is changing their plan for the rate increases. Right now I heard that they're not going to maybe take action on more rate increases at this time this year, so we'll see what happens as things move forward. Commodities are higher than prior year at 14.9% of budget, and contractual services are lower than prior year at 4.9% of budget. And then just to update you on our audit timeline, we had our preliminary field work, went very smoothly with the auditors. That's where they come out and they take a sample of our receipts, of our payroll files and such, and we provide that while they're here on site, and they check to make sure that the random choices that they've made have all been reviewed and are accurate. They'll be here for final field work the week of February 23rd and then on the week of March 16th. That's usually a hybrid of them working here on site in the Hagana conference room, and then some of it they'll be doing remotely. We're aiming for our final presentation of the audit for 2025 for June, and we hope that everything's going smoothly. That's what we're working on preparing for this week for next week. That concludes my portion of the treasurer's report this evening. Are there any questions? If not, I will turn it over to Monica for our community investment program update.
All right. So for this month, we have one project, with one item with 2 purchases going to the board for approval in February. Both are golf course replacement owner items cost. The first one is a contract for the golf cart GPS units. And the second one is for the interior furniture authorization for a 50% deposit, but the total amount for that furniture is within that agenda item as well. The changes, there are quite a few changes to the timeline as we're moving through. The first one is the water main replacement for this year, for 2026. We thought we were going to have it ready for board approval. The bid opening was this week. We do have our bid results back. We just need a bit more time to go back through and figure out how we're going to award it. We did it with a bit of flexibility in which we had a base bid with 2 alternates. So the bid prices came back, I think, good overall. We can be within the budget, but looking at the alternates, we're going to just see if those are feasible and how we want to move forward. And we were happy with the responses. I guess just overall we had 5 responses, a lot of names that we're familiar with, and so the apparent low bidder at this moment is also somebody that we have previous work history with, which is always comforting.
good history
Yes,
with.
good previous work history with, which is comforting. The next item is the Wesley Road multi-use path for the engineering. We've delayed this in the schedule. We're not going to be bringing back an engineering scope to the village board until we talk with the neighbors. So the feasibility study, which we began last year and just finished up, has some points that I think we want to seek public feedback on before we really look forward to how we want to recommend moving forward. So that feasibility study is looking at creating a pedestrian or bicycle path along Wesley Road to create a connection to the golf course. But that study kind of looked at a couple scenarios, and so we just want to get that public feedback before we decide how to move forward.
On the north side of the street?
That is a great question. It looked at both. So on the north side of the street, there are some challenges. On the south side of the street, there are some other challenges. Basically, it was looking at the land use. So on the north side of the street is actually Cook County Forest Preserve property.
Oh.
So that, I think we know through our experience with the golf course that that's going to create some of its own unique challenges. But the south side of the street has some obstacles as well, and I think that's why it's very important to look at feedback from the residents, not just along Wesley, but in that whole neighborhood of who would be utilizing that path. The next one is for schedule impacts is the public locker rooms upgrade. We're just a month behind here. We thought we would begin in January and February, but we've started it this month and we'll be wrapping up that work in February or in March. The next one is the water plant civil and site work. This is the window replacement. All of these windows down at the water plant, all the exterior windows we're looking for a replacement. They're all a little bit unique, so it is definitely a custom job. And so we went out to bid with that. During the bid process, we found some additional plans from the last window replacement. So posting that addendum, we wanted to give additional response time, so we will be bringing that to the board next month. The next one is just a batch of projects of the golf club driving range netting, the tee expansion, the driving range tee renovation, and the first tee renovation. With where we're at in the clubhouse construction, I think a lot of those items are still in flux as we're finalizing the scope and what that's going to look like, and so we've pushed those out until April, just to get a better handle on what that scope is going to look like in coordination with ongoing construction.
Just a note on that, we are working through the protective netting component with the zoning commission. So that's also driving a little bit of the scheduling from that standpoint. So we had expected that we might be back to the zoning commission in March. That's going to be pushed to April. So if this comes to you all in April, it will have already gone through that process with a recommendation from the zoning commission as well.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yes, no, thank you. Another schedule change is the parking enhancements at West Park. This one we're actually moving forward to align with the Park District's bidding and letting schedule. They plan to get this project out to bid this month with their village or their board approval in March. So we're aligning those. They bid the parking enhancements as a separate bid to help us coordinate and share that cost together, separate out from the rest of the park. And then the last update on schedule is the public safety rescue boat replacement. That one we've just pushed back 1 month, and I think just needing some additional time to scope and get pricing on that purchase.
We did find out that we will not be receiving any federal funds for that project. We had hoped that there was a grant application that we had submitted, but we did receive word about a week ago that no federal funds are available for that particular project.
So I know that was a lot of schedule changes, but any questions on those updates overall?
Thank you. So now I would like to introduce Heidi Andorfer. She's joining us by Zoom this evening to do the discussion of the Tier 2 pension benefit enhancements. Like I said, if anybody is interested, I do have the report for the actuaries.
Good evening, everybody. Thank
Hey,
you for having me here to walk you through this. I know this pension stuff is always dynamic and changing, and I know these numbers aren't exactly desirable for anybody, but I think it's helpful for this committee, especially to understand the potential impacts that are out there. I'm going to attempt to share my screen just to put up the information we'll be talking about. So let's see if this works for us. Okay. I think on my end it looks like that's working. Are you guys able to see the summary of the benefit enhancements in the letter here on the screen?
Yes, we are.
Okay, wonderful. So I thought I'd start off walking you through. This is Senate Bill 1937 that's on the table right now. It does impact other funds as well. In this case, we're specifically addressing your Article 3 Police Pension Fund. And the enhancements are sort of twofold here from a benefits perspective. The first stuff and the more impactful stuff in terms of the liability impact is really directionally moving the Tier 2 benefits closer to the Tier 1 benefits. It is not a full reversion to Tier 1, but specifically the things that they're addressing with Tier 2 are the COLA. So it stays a simple COLA, so it always reverts back to the original benefit calculation at retirement when it's calculating the cost of living adjustment, which is less beneficial than what they do for Tier 1, which is a compounding COLA, but they are moving it up to a 3% rate with this bill to the extent this bill passes. Keep in mind it is not passed at this point, but it is on the table. That 3% is more generous than the 50% of CPIU with a max of 3% that's out there right now. So that's an enhancement. The bigger one, the most necessary one, I guess, and necessary could be a loose term here, but there's talk, and you'll hear this especially with other pension funds across the state of Illinois, the safe harbor concept and having a safe harbor formula. Having a safe harbor formula allows Illinois pension funds to basically not include their participants in the Social Security system by saying that we're going to deliver a pension benefit that's at least equal to or better than the Social Security system. Many of the funds in Illinois have a pay cap for Tier 2 that will eventually make that safe harbor fail, that test fail, and the benefits won't be better than Social Security. This adjustment here to Tier 2 basically moves that salary limitation for Tier 2 up to the Social Security wage base, which would eliminate any possible safe harbor violations. Now, Article 3 is very unlikely to have a safe harbor issue anyway because they do allow retirement at a much, much earlier age than Social Security. There are other funds in Illinois where this provision is much more relevant. It's relevant to your fund in the sense that you do have a little bit higher wages in Glencoe, and so your Tier 2 folks will eventually bump up against that limit as they go through the pay progressions towards retirement. And so that will be a bigger issue for your fund than it would be for some funds downstate where their Tier 2 pay is low enough that they probably never even get to the current max limit that's existing right now for those Tier 2 people. So this provision is probably about a quarter of the impact, or maybe 20% of the impact of this whole bill for you. That's the only one, though, that really would need to be addressed across all funds to eliminate the safe harbor issue. So I did want to highlight that. The third provision and the most expensive here for Tier 2 is really this unreduced retirement being allowed at 20 years of service at age 52. This is trying to move them in the direction of Tier 1. So right now, Tier 1 can retire with 20 years of service at age 50. So Tier 2, they're saying age 52 instead of 50, but it is still allowing that immediate retirement. The weird piece here of Tier 2 is that the COLA right now starts at age 60, but in this provision, the COLA starts immediately. So basically if they retire at 52, at age 53, they start receiving COLA. That is different than Tier 1. Tier 1, if they retire at age 50, have to wait to age 55 for a COLA. This legislation does not address that discrepancy that's been introduced. We're not sure if it was intentional or not, but it is a little bit strange that they're allowing the Tier 2 under this legislation to start COLAs earlier than Tier 1. Because generally we've been moving towards tier 1, not surpassing tier 1 in any of the provisions. So that's a little bit different. The other piece of this legislation introduces the concept of drop. So what drop is basically when somebody is actively employed, they can elect to enter drop, which means at that point in time that they choose to enter drop, you calculate their retirement benefit as if they're retiring today, but they continue to work. Once they enter drop, in this case, there's a time limit of 5 years placed on their service. They can only work for 5 more years actively, but they stop accruing pension benefits at the point they enter drop. A notional account is effectively created in the pension fund where their benefits during their active years are basically stuck into a notional account for them. Instead of being paid out while they're receiving a salary still, that money is put into a notional account, and when they leave drop and actually retire, they receive that amount of money in a lump sum at retirement and then begin their annuity at that point in time. So it allows those actives to continue to stay employed, continue to receive health care benefits and salary, and then they're accumulating this retirement benefit that they receive as a lump sum at retirement. They can stay in it for a max of 5 years. This provision does have protections on that account, so that account grows with the same interest rate as whatever the fund earns. So if the fund has a great year and earns 20%, so does the drop account. However, if the fund loses 20%, the notional account does not decrease in value. So there is a floor of 0% that can be earned on that fund. So there is some protection put in place for those folks in drop during the years that they're accumulating that drop balance. This is very common in a lot of police and fire plans outside of Illinois. This would be new to Illinois plans. We haven't had this provision in there. The idea of the drop is to keep police officers and firemen to have them stick around longer, help bridge that gap with hiring practices being a little bit more challenging for folks, especially in policing. It makes sure your workforce stays around a little bit longer. It also ensures that transition of training benefits from those older officers that have experience to the younger workforce as well. So that's the idea of the drop provision here. It is set with an expiry date of 2031 in this case, so it is temporary. If to the extent that this was to pass, there's only that 5-year window in which somebody can enter drop. Therefore, very few tier 2 people could become eligible for this. They did not exclude tier 2 in this provision, but given the time frame, there's just not many tier 2 that will become eligible by 2031 to even be able to receive this. So this is really more of a tier 1 provision. So those are the benefits that are introduced by Senate Bill 1937. The other piece of the Senate bill legislation is the way the plan is funded. Now, we've done this analysis on your fund in 2 ways because you choose to fund the plan in a different fashion than what Illinois statute suggests. You choose to fund it in a better fashion than what Illinois statute suggests. We did the analysis first on the statutory funding because that will show you the impact of what the other piece of this legislation does. So currently you are using, for Illinois statute, you have to use projected unit credit. You fund in the year 2040 and you fund to 90% funded target by that date. This legislation basically kicks that can out from 2040 to 2055. So this first analysis that we did shows you both the impact of the enhanced benefits, and then we step that off one more time and show you the impact of that kicking the can concept. We did have to make a few assumptions in addition to just assuming the regular assumptions that we do for your valuation. We also had to assume new entrants entered the fund at some rate. So we're assuming that they entered age 29, the salary of $100,000, and about 94% of those are going to be male. And that's based on the data that you currently have in your fund. So if we look at the impact of that analysis for the statutory minimum calculation here, just to show you what you're looking at here, this first section, and I know this may be really small, hopefully if I recall your room there, you have a nice big TV to see this on, but the first set of columns here is the current benefits. We're showing you the unfunded actual accrued liability and how that plays out over time. The normal cost in the middle, so just the cost of accruing benefits each year, and then the contribution calculation based on that statutory calculation that's required. This is funding to that 2040 date using projected unit credit, that 90% target. We are showing out to the year 2056 so that you can see the full impact of that sort of kicking the can concept. And the total contribution that will be paid out over that time frame is expected to be about $74,000. If we discount that back and look at it on a present value basis, it's about 34 million, a little bit shy of 34 million. Now the next section, all we do in this is change the benefits. So we're going to reflect the enhanced benefits but maintain the 2040 funding. So that's what this middle section is. You can see that your unfunded is not going to go down as dramatically because you have higher normal costs, higher contributions. So in addition to the liability spiking the year that that's implemented in 2026, you can see that normal costs in all of that payment stream is a little bit higher. Contributions are a little bit higher as well. And then the third section shows you the impact of the benefit enhancements plus the 2055 funding target date now. So that will reduce the contributions in the short term, but over the longer term, you end up paying more. You can see the total contribution that you make under the 2040 is about 93.7 million. If you kick that out to 2055, you have to contribute 120.8 million. So it is higher. However, if you look at the impact here, we've done the differences in the impact versus baseline. If you compare the present value of those contribution streams, you can see that you get numbers that are pretty close to each other. So about $6.4 million on a discounted basis is the increase just due to the benefits. Basically, kicking the can to 2055 on a present value basis should be very similar to the 2040 date. It's a timing issue of when you're making those payments. It's pay me now or pay me later. Under 2040, you're paying more earlier, therefore less later. When you kick it out to 2055, that just prolongs your agony in a sense. You're having to pay, try to catch up on that unfunded for a longer amount of time. In the end, though, you can see that on a present value basis, the benefits alone will increase the contributions about 18.9%. So just shy of a 20% increase for those benefit enhancements effectively. And then otherwise, it's just a timing issue on when those payments come true. Now, this is on the consolidated fund report basis. So we are assuming a 6.8% interest rate, which is a little bit different than what we assume for your plan funding. And it is using statutory funding methods here. So that's an important difference to note from what I'll show you next. Before I get on to the next analysis, are there any questions at this point? Okay, great. I will flip over to the plan funding, which might be more interesting to you because this analysis here is based on the way you choose to fund your plan using your own assumptions. We are a little bit more conservative in our interest rate assumption here, so we are using 6.5%. That is in your current funding policy. We intentionally stayed a little bit more conservative there as we saw how consolidation would play out, how the investments would play out over time. So that is something that could change in the future, but the current analysis here was done based on the assumptions of the 6.5% based on your funding policy to date. You are assuming a 15-year open amortization policy. Basically what that means is every year we look at whatever your unfunded actual accrued liability is and we re-amortize the mortgage. So we're always re-amortizing annually over 15 years. In effect, what that is doing is we reach out every year and we grab one more year of taxpayers over which to spread out that unfunded actual accrued liability. You are using a low enough payroll growth assumption that we are addressing principal on that unfunded each year, so it will decrease over time. But every year as we reach out and grab one more year of taxpayers, we've kind of slowed the pace at which we get to full funding, but we are ensuring more equity amongst your generations of taxpayers by using that open methodology and always reaching out and grabbing more taxpayers. So in this analysis, there's only the two sections because we're not going to change the funding policy based on this legislation. This is just a pure analysis of what the impact of just the benefit enhancements are here. So again, you can see the first section is based on current benefits, unfunded actual accrued liability, normal costs, and your contributions here. We look at the middle section, that's where we see the enhanced benefits. you could see that in the last section here, that causes an increase in contributions over this time frame of about $22.6 million. On a discounted basis, it's about $7.8 million, or a 20.3% increase in benefits, basically. So pretty similar to the statutory minimum, which we'd expect. There's a little bit of a disconnect in the interest rates, so they're not going to match perfectly, but directionally pretty similar in that 20% ballpark for an increase in benefits. I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago. The attorney in that meeting is not, does not think this legislation is likely to pass this year. Of course, it's Illinois, anything can still happen, but as they understand it, that maybe Pritzker doesn't have an appetite at this point in time politically to increase benefits across Illinois. We'll see what actually happens, but if it does happen, it would probably be in May, and you know, it's Illinois, so anything could happen, but I think that was hopeful to hear that perhaps this is something that's not going to go through this year. You know, from the perspective of the funds, I know that there's a lot of folks that are not excited about this, given the cost impact. So with that, are there any other questions for me regarding this?
Heidi, first of all, thank you very much for taking
Sure.
something that's quite convoluted and making it pretty darn clear. Thank you. That's a talent, and we
Sure,
appreciate
thank
it. I'm just wondering, while it was not anything you've been asked to calculate, have you seen estimates of what it would mean? I mean, Lord knows if this is what it's going to cost us in our little town. And you know, when you think about other towns, it's going to cost them a lot. But the state also, right, would be subject to these changes. What kind of an increase would the state be looking at out of their own coffers, if you know?
I don't. We haven't run that analysis. We have had a few folks interested in maybe having us look at the IMRF impact, since that's a big one across the state. You know, IMRF's funded a little bit differently, and the benefit provisions, a lot of them are similar, but there are some differences and could impact things a little bit differently. When I read through the IMRF impacts, if I had to speculate, it'll be higher than a 20% increase based on what I saw. You know, and across the state, all of these funds sort of impact all of the communities. So if you think across the board, it's going to be in the ballpark of something like 20 to 25% per fund. It's pretty significant cost across the state. And for some of those funds that aren't very well funded, that's going to be, you know, a much harder pill to swallow maybe than something like IMRF, where they're better funded in the first place, and maybe that's not as painful there. But a teacher's fund or something like that, this could be pretty impactful.
Yep.
All right, thank you. That's helpful, because that just adds to the hope that there'll be enough people calling up their various and sundry representatives saying, don't do this.
Yeah, we had several funds have us perform a similar analysis like this. So, you know, with the idea, I think that they were reporting back to groups that were, you know, lobbying against this downstate. So I think that was the idea of having a lot of data to be able to, you know, definitively show the impact on communities. So, you know, I think that there are folks that are out there with real numbers and real information that are trying to make sure that the decision makers are well informed on this.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Heidi. This is an initiative that in our region, the Northwest Municipal Conference is asking all of its 48 members to run these updated numbers and these projections so that we can aggregate that together. To your point, Trustee Rubin, you know, we're an organization of the size that we are. We see the impact here, but if you contemplated across those 48 municipalities with their various funding levels, understanding what that impact is becomes very real when you can actually pass that across the table to a legislator and say, we're not talking in generalizations. Here's the real impact of what this means. And financially, we cannot undertake that. We have shared that perspective, And President Rowan and I were in a meeting with Senator Morrison, about a month or so ago, talking very much about that. And what she said is, well, numbers are very helpful. Help me understand what this actually means. Well, that's what this does.
Mm-hmm.
It helps us all understand what this actually means. It isn't just an amorphous thing. This is very practical and complicated. So
We can see the end result of on a per year budget basis, worst case scenario. And these numbers are small, I'm looking at them, you're like, what's the estimate?
What, $500,000?
I think about a $500,000 impact. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So if you look at the page I have up now, that final column there will show you the annual impact, the annual basically additional contribution that we anticipate as a result of this legislation.
Thank you.
And you mentioned the Northwest Municipal Conference, which is where this analysis was initiated from. They shared it with several other conferences that have groups across, different suburban areas as well. So it's not just that group that is talking to folks downstate. There's other similarly, organized groups that are doing the same thing too.
Any other questions? Heidi, thank you very much. Again, that was excellent.
Okay, of course, anytime, and to the extent that after this meeting you think of another question or anything on this analysis confuses you as you're reviewing it later, feel free to reach out to me directly and we can walk through that at that point.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks, thank you so much, you too.
And so with that, we'll move on to our last item, which is the review and discussion of the 2026 Glencoe Alfresco Sponsorship Program. And Sammy Hansen will discuss that.
I will just speak to it quickly. So per the village's donation policy, we are bringing forth a sponsorship program that we would like to implement for the Glencoe Alfresco event series. This is the third summer that we will be offering this series. It grew significantly last summer. So we're at the point where we feel comfortable offering a business, local business, the opportunity to sponsor this event, and we feel like they'll have a return on investment in that sponsorship. So in your packet, we outlined a very basic sponsorship option. There's a headliner sponsor who would sponsor the entire series, so all 3 events this summer. And then there's also a smaller opportunity where someone could sponsor just one of the events of the summer and support the fee to hire bands for these events. I'm happy to answer any additional questions you guys may have about this program. We didn't do sponsorship last year yet. Since we just funded it.
We paid for it,
Since it's a newer event, we didn't feel comfortable yet offering that opportunity, not knowing whether or not it was going to be successful and have a return on investment for our local businesses. So last year we had a significant attendance, so we feel comfortable providing that opportunity this year.
We're working on trying to find ways to expand it from a footprint standpoint that may include growing into the street. If you will remember, when we did that streetscape enhancement, we designed particularly the east end of Tudor Court to kind of support this type of event. We have extra power and things like that at the end of the street for bands to be able to plug into. And what we are trying to navigate is working through Writers Theater's schedule. They have, if you'll remember, a pretty heavy show schedule, and they're anticipating 2 shows during the months of June and July, and so we want to be mindful of the traffic impacts of shutting down that street for 1 or 2 evenings, depending on setup timelines and things like that. So we're negotiating that with them right now, but one way or another, we know we can grow this event. It was. I mean, to Sammy's credit, I think she really took some ownership of this last year, and the community really enjoyed it. So we want to keep growing this type of thing. We know that the community building activities like this are really important to so many of our residents, and so as we're able to, we're going to try to keep enhancing them. Excellent. All right, we'll roll with it.
Yeah, that concludes our presentation this evening. Are there any other questions?
I have one thing I want to say. We know that our CFO is irreplaceable, but she's otherwise occupied at the moment. But, so I want to say to Margaret, absolutely seamless,
Thank you.
absolutely seamless. Great job.
Thank you so much.
And to the extent that our irreplaceable CFO has been riding herd on the rest of our folks, you still delivered.
Thank you.
Is there any reason to talk tonight about the WB Olson? Was the WB Olson thing, that was the 392?
That's the new one. Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we can certainly. Happy to just kind of give you a high-level overview. So there's an agenda item added to Thursday night's board agenda, which is a change order covering a series of things, and I'll let Monica kind of talk about the specifics of that as it relates to the clubhouse project.
Recording in progress.
Sorry. Oops. Hello. As it relates to the clubhouse project. And so this is something that we've been working on for several months in terms of trying to make sure that the numbers that are in that change order are backed up by both our own review of them, but also working through them with the architects, kind of going back through the plan sets and the changes to the plan sets over time, and working through some modifications to the building itself that we know we need based off of some additional awareness as we've talked with restaurant vendors and things of that nature. So I'll let Monica kind of walk you through it, and we're happy to answer questions that you may have.
Yeah, so this is change order number 2 with WB Olson. The first one, if you can recall, was in regards to a permitting comment, specifically in regards to PVC. We cannot use PVC
Right.
in the clubhouse, and so we brought that to you because some plumbing had begun, and we wanted to make sure that that had gotten approval. So now that we have the full permit, we're working with WBO to reconcile some of the changes that had happened from the plans from when we went out to bid, because they were not approved plans, they were issued for permit plans, to where we're at with the issue for construction IFC plans. Some of those changes are owner-initiated changes as we went through. You know, we realized there's a component of a scope. There were some additional roller shades that we felt like needed to be added for the windows. We forgot to add a flagpole, so we wanted to make sure that that was lit. And there's, you know, if there's small things, there was a door that we had, I mean, I could go on. There's a lot of small things. I think the biggest owner-initiated change was our eastern driveway revision, right? So we added that eastern driveway, modified where that is in coordination with the neighbors. So there are some costs associated with that. But this overall change order that's being presented to the board has kind of 3 big items. One is the changes that were owner initiated, permanent initiated, that have come through now that we have permit in hand. The second one is winterization. So with the original schedule that we're looking at, our contract with WB Olson says winterization is not included, and so we're creating funds available to help with the winterization of the clubhouse, because we thought we would be enclosed prior to winter, and just with where we're at with permit delays, we're not. And then the last one is just a couple items that were identified where we've established an allowance, so we're not going back to you with another change order. And that's, I think that was minimal. I think it was around $15,000 of allowances of changes that have been identified, but the costs haven't been firmed up. That's what I put it. So that is where we're at. We're continuing to talk with WB Olson. They have approached us for additional funds due to schedule delays. And we're just not at a place where we're ready to present anything to the village board. So we're still kind of talking through what does that look like. How, I mean, we need backup information, and what we're presenting this week is we have all the backup documentation from the subs. Staff has had time to go through and look at it.
Order of magnitude of scheduled delays, is that a $50,000, $150,000?
I think you're talking like the future,
Right,
like the
but
next.
when you finally work it all through with them, what's your total wild guess, no one will hold you to it, number?
That's a good Patsy question. I don't know. I mean, I think that's part of the reason why we're not at a point that we're ready to share,
Okay.
is because trying to quantify that is difficult in and of the fact that it's not that we didn't start construction until we got our permit in
Right.
December, right? We have been able to continue with construction through a series of early starts. We've made
Right.
good progress. And so it blurs everything a little bit, right? Because it's like, well, we've continued, well, why is the schedule
Right,
up? Well,
right.
because we didn't have like full approval and permit. And, you know, each request for early start that we submitted, you know, we were doing it on a timely basis, but it just created, I think, some delay overall, as far as coordinating the contractors out there and schedules. And you're
Gotcha.
shaking your head like that is exactly why we're working through
Right, I
all
would
of
say
this.
just to give you a
Understood.
gut, it's in a six-figure number. We
Okay.
just don't know what that six-figure number is. It's not close to a seven-figure number, but it's probably not a five-figure number either. So,
Okay.
Thank you, that's a good way to put it.
just to, and Monica's right. I mean, I think the part of this, with this schedule has been kind of the unique way that we started with so many permitting agencies. If this was our project solely, we would have would have had more clarity at the beginning, probably, in terms of being more confident in the scheduling.
Mhm.
But, you know, some of that is out of our control, not all of it.
But at the end of the day, they're coming to you and saying, it costs more because we couldn't do it then.
Right,
Example, winterization. Well, winterization's taken care of
Right.
separately.
right.
But it's kind of just an easier one to show. But I'm assuming that we are going to hold them tightly to show us why
Absolutely.
it costs more
Yes.
in March than it would have in
Have
January.
have you been sitting in our meetings unexpectedly? Because
Yeah. Okay.
it's almost an identical question.
Otherwise,
Yes.
Yeah,
no.
Yeah, and I
Right.
mean, right, I mean, and that's been us vetting
Right.
through kind of, you know, what does winterization costs include, and,
Right.
you know, how does it, like, what actual labor is taking place, what equipment is being bought? I mean, there are heaters in the basement of the clubhouse right now, de-thawing the ground so we can pour the foundation, you know, and those are actual costs that do make sense that were unanticipated for the project. But I feel like, right, I mean, there's a lot of vetting that we're going through.
Mhm.
And we're not taking anything at face value to
Mhm.
say, we need more money. Well, why? Show us. Explain to us how this makes sense. And yeah, I mean, those conversations have been progressing
and the other thing I would say is that this is not unique, right? For a project of this magnitude and of this timeline and duration, you are frequently finding yourself in a situation where something was assumed, but it is an assumption. And then when you actually get to doing it, it's either the same, different, or it comes out in the wash. So that's where we're talking through is not everything that takes longer costs more.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Some things do, some things cost less. And so making sure that those things are canceling one another out before we start adding to it is exactly the process that we're working our way through.
And even in what's going to the board this week with the issue for construction change order, I mean, there were value engineering decisions that we made of, you know, changing the partitions in the bathroom, and there's credits that you'll see mixed in with also, you know, changes of additional money. But, I mean, so it's a variety of
Yeah.
give and take.
You don't do it, I understand, you don't do a construction project like this
This is
without a
Adam's fault. He
whole
did it on
lot of
purpose.
changes. And inevitably, it's
Express.
more.
I
It's
mean,
never less.
I
Yeah.
would say a huge driving factor though is is the amount of time it took to get through the permitting process. It took us over about, 6 rounds of review. with Cook
6 plan
County.
reviews.
And that's just not typical. That wasn't anticipated by our architects, it wasn't anticipated by the construction manager. And so, we've had a lot of conversations about why. And, they're kind of shaking their heads too about, I don't know what, they've had similar projects who they've not experienced this level of comments and going back and forth. So I don't know. I just, we've had a lot of great conversations about the permitting process and the delays that it's been causing.
Let me say, on Gary's point, in addition to things that might come out in the wash, as I sort of follow the project, I understand that we have some places where we sort of have claims. We have things that we think, that they didn't do it right, or they didn't plan it right, and I'm not going to canvass those now, but as I understand it, those have not been resolved, and before we do whatever the last change order, when they have their hands out, we're going to, at a minimum, say, excuse me, we have to set off against these other things, and we're staying on that. And that, might mean they get paid a little bit less at the end. So, and I think we have lawyers that are looking at this, and we have eagle-eyed staff people who are looking at this, and I just want to say we owe it to our residents to keep doing that.
Yep.
We love our contractors, but we did, I don't, a naked gun, when the bad guy, was caught planning to kill the queen, and Priscilla Presley says to him, how could you be so horrible? He said, you forget, my dear, for a number of years I was a building contractor. So we should keep that in mind as we're dealing with W. Olson, even though we like them.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate it. All right, anyone else? If not, we'll let these people go home. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.